Previous 2 years, production history first, episode last. Before production of the third series, Clearwater Features closed down, with the Britt Allcroft Company becoming the sole producer of Thomas. Producer Robert D. Cardenay departed before the third series, and Britt Allcroft took his place as co-producer alongside David Mitton. The series was a mix of stories derived from the Railway series, magazine stories written by the series' future head writer Andrew Brenner. Yep, the Andrew Brenner, the guy who would eventually become the head writer for the CGI series, and a couple of original stories written by Allcroft and Mitton. One of the primary reasons for diverging from the original books was that many of the stories not yet adapted featured large numbers of new characters, which would be expensive to produce. Another reason was that the producers wanted more stories about Thomas, the nominal main character, as well as the other already established characters. According to Steve Asquith, it was felt that some of the original stories were repetitive and too storybook orientated. The Reverend Wilbert Awdry took umbrage with the looser adaptations of the stories and publicly criticised the original episodes, particularly Henry's Forest, for the lack of realism and how Thomas was, as he put it, crane-shunted into some of these episodes. The third series of the show was first released exclusively on VHS in the UK on the 11th of November 1991. Originally, only the first 16 episodes were released on VHS before all 26 episodes aired on UK television starting on the 25th of February 1992. And in the US, the first 16 episodes aired on Shining Time Station in November 1991, and final 10 episodes airing in 1993. As we all know, Sir Ringo Starr left the production after the second series of the show, and so he was replaced by the late Michael Angelis for the UK, and George Carlin in the US. And Michael Angelis has been narrating the show since the 90s, and he's become the longest running narrator for the UK dub of the show. And those two exclusive VHS tapes, Time for Trouble and Other Stories, and Trust Thomas and Other Stories, were how I was introduced to Series 3. And if I remember correctly, Trust Thomas was my first ever Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends VHS tape. So as you can imagine, I grew up with the early narrations of this series. So any sound clips you may hear for the first 16 episodes for this series will mostly be from the early narrations, because while I do like both versions of the narrations, I just grew up with the early narrations more, and I find that some of the later narrations for the first 16 episodes sounded a little bit rushed, as if Michael Angelis thought, do I really have to re-record these lines again? It was perfect the way it was. I don't know if that's how it actually went, but the way he went through the second recordings, it made it seem like that. And with all that out of the way, let's get down to the first episode of the third series, A Scarf for Percy, based on Percy and the Trousers from the Railway series book Henry and the Green Engine. This is one of the episodes that ended up being better than the original book story, and I'll explain why after I go through the story. It is a very cold winter morning on the island of Sodor, with Thomas and Percy in the sheds feeling the brunt of it. Thomas complains that their firelighter is late, but Percy tells them that the cold actually woke them up early. As the wind and snow make the two engines even colder, the two decide to take their minds off the weather by talking about warm fins in hopes that they will feel less cold as a result. Percy lists off some fins known for keeping away the cold, and his mind soon turns to scarves, to which Thomas jokes that Percy needs a nice warm scarf around his funnel. But while he was only joking, Percy thinks happily how warm a scarf would be until the firelighter finally arrives. The Fat Controller is much warmer that morning, as he is enjoying hot porridge for breakfast while looking forward to taking some visitors on a tour of the island. He tells his wife Ladyhand that he has pressed his best trousers and will put them in his trunk ready to be changed into when the photographs are being taken. He then leaves to catch his train. Soon Percy is hard at work, still thinking about scarves, which is not helped by seeing one on everyone everywhere he goes. He complains about his cold funnel to Henry, telling him he wants a scarf. Henry tells Percy that engines don't wear scarves, but Percy retorts that Henry cannot because his funnel is too small. Henry is insulted, but Percy, still fuming, puffs away before he can answer, and even the bigger engines are scoffed off as he prepares to pull the special train. At the station, it is nearly time for the photographs, and the Fat Controller is waiting anxiously for his trousers, which are in a trunk on a baggage trolley being carried across the line. The two porters pulling the trolley walk backwards to ensure nothing falls off, but they are also unable to see what is coming. Percy, still feeling cheeky, arrives at the station and his driver shuts off steam as usual. Percy decides to start at the coaches by coming in as quietly as possible. However, he is so quiet that the porters do not hear him either. Percy does not stop until it is too late. He crashes into the trolley and frightens the porters. The force of the impact sends the luggage and a crate of jam flying into the air. Jam ends up splattering across Percy, the Fat Controller, and the passengers, while a top hat lands on Percy's lamp iron and a best pair of trousers end up wrapping themselves around his funnel as if it was a scarf. Everyone is very angry, especially the Fat Controller, who seizes his hat before discovering what has become of his trousers, making him even angrier. He tells Percy that now they will have to pay the passengers for their ruined clothes and warns him never to play tricks on coaches again. Percy feels very silly and quickly leaves for the yard. Percy soon encounters James, who jokes that Percy found a scarf after all and runs off to tell Henry the news. That night, Thomas and the now clean Percy prepare to go to sleep, happy that the firelighter has agreed to come early the next morning. Henry arrives, having enjoyed taking the passengers on their tour, and feels sorry for Percy. However, he cannot resist a small joke as he mentions that the weather is meant to be warmer the next day and that there will be no need for a scarf. Percy assures that not only is he now aware that engines need warm boilers, but he secretly knows that he hates scarves anyway. This is quite a unique episode for the TV series at the time, as it's the first one to be set during winter time and have snow, because the previous two seasons didn't have a snow-themed episode or winter-themed episode as a starter, which makes this one the first to have it. And you remember when I said that this adaptation was better than the actual book? It was mainly due to the fact that the story in the book is actually really short compared to the other stories in that book. Not to mention the fact that it has nothing to do with the Henry the Green Engine plot. It just exists in between Gordon's whistle and Henry's sneeze, so it's more like a filler story. And there's no real explanation to why Percy would want a scarf other than seeing everyone wearing one and just thinking, ooh, I can wear a scarf too. But in the adaptation, it's Thomas who gives Percy the idea, saying that he needs a woolly scarf around his funnel. And even though he was only joking about it, Percy took it literally. Much like how he took the backing signals thing literally, since Percy was still young and naive and easily believed in anything he was told. There's also the fact that the story tells us that it's a frosty day, but the illustration shows no evidence of frost there. It just looks like a regular dry day. Whereas in the TV adaptation, they show and say that it's a cold winter morning and that it actually snows. So this gives a proper reason for everyone to wear scarves on that day, rather than just having a clear sunny day in the illustration and saying, oh, it's really cold. Yeah, from the illustration you just don't get that notion that it's cold and frosty. Which is where the TV series version succeeds, having it actually snow and making it look like it's a day where you should be wrapped up warm with scarves. And this was an episode I've always looked forward to watching whenever I put on Time for Trouble and other stories when I was a kid. I especially loved the little banter between Percy and Henry in the middle of the episode.
My funnel's cold, he puffed. I want a scarf. Rubbish, Percy, said Henry. Engines don't wear scarves. Engines with proper funnels do, replied Percy. You've only got a small one.
And the episode has become one of the most iconic parts of the TV series to date. It was so iconic that a CGI series recreation of the scene where Percy crashes into the baggage trolley is made for Blue Mountain Mystery as a reference to the episode in that special. And I'm going to go over a slight narration difference in this episode. It's in the scene where the Fat Controller scolds Percy for his little trick. In the early narration on the VHS tape, the Fat Controller sounds completely pissed off about the whole thing.
The Fat Controller seized the top hat. Mine, he said. Percy, look at this. Yes, sir. I am, sir. My best trousers, too. Yes, sir. Please, sir. We must pay the passengers for their spoiled clothes. And my trousers are ruined. I hope this will teach you not to play tricks with the coaches.
Whereas in the redone version of it, he sounds a little calmer.
The Fat Controller seized the top hat. Mine, he said. Percy, look at this. Yes, sir. I am, sir. My best trousers, too. Yes, sir. Please, sir. We must pay the passengers for their spoiled clothes, and my trousers are ruined. I hope this will teach you not to play tricks with the coaches.
It's a huge difference when you look at both versions back to back. But I've got to say I prefer the original version of that conversation a lot more, because Michelangelos really does play it off well. You can really tell how pissed off the Fat Controller is in this moment. In conclusion, The Scarf for Percy, I feel, is a good way to start off the third series, taking a relatively short story from the Railway series and making it even better than the original. giving a little more plot to it, and a lot more humour to it as well as Thomas the Tank Engine can provide. This is an episode that's definitely worth checking out at this time of year, especially if you're feeling cold or want to wrap up warm. Just don't be tempted to wear trousers as a scarf. You'll look silly.